The air over Los Angeles was heavy with the golden stillness of Thanksgiving, that peculiar kind of peace that always comes before the storm. At Forrester Creations, the warmth of family, tradition, and feigned civility filled every room, polished silver, glowing candles, and laughter that rang a little too brightly. But beneath it all, the past was waiting, coiled like a serpent ready to strike. For Ridge Forrester, the man who had built his life on charisma, contradictions, and charm, this Thanksgiving would not be one of gratitude. It would be one of reckoning. Because as the first leaves fell across the driveway of the Forrester mansion, a woman he had tried to forget was coming home, and she was bringing with her the truth that would unravel everything he thought he had buried. Quinn Fuller had always been a force of nature, seductive, unpredictable, as dazzling as she was dangerous. Her departure years ago had been sudden and silent, leaving behind only whispers and the faint trace of perfume that never quite left the walls of her old life. Ridge had convinced himself that she was gone for good, a chapter sealed by shame and secrecy. But fate, with its cruel sense of timing, had chosen this day, this celebration of family, unity, and peace, to deliver her back into his world. The doorbell rang just as the family gathered around the table. Brooke Logan, Ridge's wife, was radiant in soft gold, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her laughter echoing with the confidence of a woman who believed her marriage had finally reached safe ground. Steffi and Thomas traded jokes about the company's next line. Hope smiled politely, and even Eric seemed content, sipping his wine as if the ghosts of the past had finally left him alone. But when the door opened and Quinn stepped inside, time itself seemed to stop. She hadn't aged a day, or perhaps she had aged just enough to make her beauty more dangerous, more deliberate. Her eyes, sharp and unreadable, swept across the room until they found Ridge. For one fleeting moment, the noise faded and the air thickened between them. The past, that one night of madness, of wine and regret, of secrets sealed with a kiss, came rushing back with merciless clarity. Brooke's laughter faltered. Steffi's fork clattered against her plate. Even Eric's face went pale, as if he were seeing a ghost. Quinn, Ridge finally managed, his voice low, rough. What are you doing here? Quinn smiled, that familiar, feline smile that had always unnerved him. I came home, she said softly. And I didn't come alone. The words hung in the air like thunder before lightning. It took only seconds for the implication to sink in, but the silence that followed felt eternal. Brooke's eyes narrowed, her smile shattered into disbelief. Ridge's breath caught. The room, once filled with warmth, now felt like ice. Later, when the guests were gone and the house had descended into uneasy quiet, Ridge found Quinn standing alone on the terrace, looking out over the city lights. The years had changed her, but not the gravity she carried, that quiet mix of sorrow and defiance that had always drawn him in. She didn't turn when he approached. You thought you could make it disappear, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. That night, that secret. You told me to leave, to forget, to move on. And I did, Ridge. I left everything behind. But there are some things you can't bury. Some truths that won't stay silent. He wanted to deny it, to tell her she was mistaken, that whatever this was, it couldn't possibly mean what she implied. But he had seen the look in her eyes, that flicker of maternal pride, of righteous anger. It was real. You're saying, he began, his voice failing him. Yes, Quinn said simply, turning to face him. You have a child, Ridge.
Assant.
He's your blood. The ground seemed to shift beneath him. Every instinct, denial, fear, disbelief, collided at once. The night she referred to had been a blur, a mistake wrapped in grief and whiskey. It was after a fight with Brooke, after months of tension, when he had found himself at Quinn's door seeking solace he didn't understand. She had comforted him, and he had let her. The next morning, they had both agreed to pretend it never happened. She had left town soon after, and Ridge had forced himself to believe the secret had died with her departure. But it hadn't. It had been growing, quietly, invisibly, into something that now stood to destroy them all. Brooke found them together moments later. Her voice, when she spoke, was trembling not with sadness, but with fury. "You knew," she said to Ridge, her eyes blazing. "You knew, and you let her walk in here like this?" "I didn't know," Ridge said quickly, his words desperate. "I swear to you, Brooke, I didn't." But Brooke's rage was beyond reason. "Don't you dare lie to me," she spat. "Do you think I don't see it? The way you're looking at her? You've always had this weakness for her. And now you've given her another reason to keep coming back." Quinn stepped forward, calm but unflinching. "This isn't about you, Brooke," she said quietly. "This is about a child who deserves to know who his father is." Brooke turned on her, eyes wet, voice sharp. "You have no right to walk into our lives and destroy everything we've built." Quinn's expression softened, though her words were cold. "Maybe you should ask yourself why everything you build with Ridge keeps collapsing." The slap of truth in that sentence left Brooke trembling. Ridge stood between them, his hands shaking, the weight of years pressing down on him. The woman he loved and the woman he had tried to forget were now locked in a battle that would decide not just his future, but the very meaning of the life he'd spent decades constructing. Over the following days, the truth rippled through Los Angeles like wildfire. The press caught wind of it first, whispers of Quinn's return, the revelation of a secret child, the scandal of Ridge's betrayal. Forrester Creations, always a reflection of the family's turbulence, became a house divided. Steffi defended her father, arguing that everyone makes mistakes and that a child is never to blame. Hope, though sympathetic to Quinn, sided with Brooke, seeing the pain her mother was enduring. Eric, torn between pride and heartbreak, retreated into silence, his old wounds with Quinn reopening like scars ripped apart. Quinn, meanwhile, refused to be shamed. She held her head high, introducing her son, a boy named Rowan, with Ridge's sharp eyes and her unmistakable spirit, to the world not as a scandal, but as truth long overdue. She wasn't seeking forgiveness, she was demanding recognition. "He deserves his father," she said, and no one could argue with that. Ridge tried to be the man he always pretended to be, calm, rational, in control, but the storm inside him was uncontrollable. He was drawn to his son, to the strange and miraculous bond that had formed in his absence. Yet every time he looked at the boy, he saw the night he had betrayed Brooke. Every word Brooke spoke cut deeper, her love curdling into bitterness. "How many times do I have to be humiliated before I learn?" she cried one night, the sound of her voice echoing through the empty house. Taylor returned to town just as the news broke. Her presence, as always, stirred everything Ridge had tried to suppress: guilt, nostalgia, comfort. She listened quietly as he confessed the truth, her face unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "You've spent your whole life trying to be two men, Ridge, the one who loves Brooke and the one who destroys her. Maybe it's time you chose who you really are." Brooke, for her part, could not choose between love and pride. Every instinct told her to leave, to finally break free from the endless cycle of betrayal. Yet when she looked at Ridge, she saw not just the man who had hurt her, but the one she had built her life around. "You always find new ways to break me," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "And I always find new ways to forgive you. But maybe this time I won't." Quinn, too, faced her own reckoning. For all her defiance, the cost of the truth weighed on her. She had spent years hating Ridge for casting her out, for making her carry the burden of secrecy alone. But now, seeing the chaos she had unleashed, she began to question whether justice had come too late. Still, she would not retreat. She had lived in silence long enough. The truth, she told herself, is the only thing worth the pain. Thanksgiving faded into December, and with it came the cold clarity of aftermath. Ridge stood in his office one evening, the city lights flickering beneath him, as the sounds of the holiday faded into distance. His marriage to Brooke was hanging by a thread, his reputation was under siege, his son, a living embodiment of his weakness, was now a permanent part of his world. And yet, Amid the ruin, there was something strangely freeing about the honesty of it all. For the first time in years, there were no lies left to tell. Still, in the quiet that followed, one truth remained. Ridge Forrester had always been a man who loved deeply and destructively, who built beauty out of chaos and then watched it burn. And now, as Quinn's return tore through his life once more, he found himself standing at the same crossroads he had faced 1,000 times before, between passion and peace, love and guilt, past and future. As the wind swept through the night, carrying the echoes of laughter, heartbreak, and promises broken too many times to count, Ridge knew that nothing, not Brooke's forgiveness, not Quinn's defiance, not even the existence of his son, would change the fact that some mistakes live forever. And somewhere, across town, Brooke sat alone by the fire, staring into the flames that flickered like the ghosts of every love she had lost. She whispered his name once, softly, almost tenderly, before the tears came. In that moment, the city outside glittered with deceptive beauty, the same beauty that had always defined their world, fragile, intoxicating, and utterly impossible to hold. Under the golden wash of the Thanksgiving afternoon sun, the world of the bold and the beautiful shimmered with deceptive peace. Waves rolled gently against the shore outside Taylor Hayes' beach house, the kind of rhythmic calm that belied the turmoil simmering just beyond those glass doors. Inside, Ridge Forrester stood surrounded by what looked, at first glance, like the perfect family tableau, Steffi carving turkey with laughter in her eyes, Finn setting out glasses of wine, little Kelly chasing Hayes across the rug. Taylor, radiant in quiet grace, moved easily through the room, her laughter soft, familiar, dangerously comforting. But what no one said aloud, what everyone in that house felt, was the ghost of Brooke Logan, Ridge's wife, sitting silently in the empty space between every glance, every forced smile, every breath of gratitude. Brooke was nowhere near the ocean that day. Back in the Logan estate, the warmth of Thanksgiving barely reached her. The house was full of food, the table elegantly set, but her heart felt hollow. She told Donna and Katie that she was fine, that Ridge needed to spend the holiday with Steffi and the children. Family time, he'd called it, as if she weren't part of that family too. Brooke had agreed, her voice steady, her smile polished. Yet every passing hour carved the truth deeper. Ridge had chosen to spend Thanksgiving with his past, not his present. It was the kind of betrayal Brooke had learned to mask over the years, not through anger, but through silence. She poured wine, smiled for her sisters, and let the conversation drift to anything but Ridge. Yet somewhere deep inside, something fragile began to crack. How many times had she stood in this place, convincing herself that Ridge's love was strong enough to bridge the distance between them? How many holidays had she survived knowing that part of his heart would always belong to Taylor? Back at the beach house, Taylor tried not to let hope betray her. She told herself that this was about family, about giving their grandchildren a Thanksgiving filled with laughter instead of tension. And yet, when Ridge smiled at her, the same way he used to, with that mixture of admiration and nostalgia, she felt something stir that she had buried long ago. It wasn't love, not exactly. It was the ache of memory, the dangerous illusion that maybe, just maybe, they had stepped back into the simpler years before betrayal, before rivalry, before everything became so painfully complicated. Steffi watched them both with the quiet satisfaction of a daughter who had finally seen her family whole again. For years she had longed for this moment, her parents in the same room, her children surrounded by the comfort of generations. To her, it wasn't betrayal. It was restoration. She didn't care about the paper boundaries of Ridge's marriage. She saw the man who had always been torn between two worlds, finally where he belonged. She poured her father another glass of wine, catching his lingering glance toward Taylor, and smiled to herself. Maybe, she thought, some things were meant to find their way home. But destiny, in the Forrester world, never allows peace to last long. While Ridge laughed softly at Hayes' latest joke, Deacon Sharp raised a glass miles away at Il Giardino, his restaurant glowing with candlelight, his heart caught between guilt and longing. Sheila Carter sat across from him, her eyes glinting with something no one could quite read. Not sorrow, not relief, but the eerie calm of a woman too quiet after a storm. The seat beside her, once reserved for Luna, was empty. Luna, her granddaughter, was dead, a girl whose name had become a curse whispered in every corner of Los Angeles. The death had shaken everyone, but no one more than Sheila. Though Luna had been branded a monster, a murderer, a manipulator, a broken remnant of the Carter bloodline, she had still been family. And for Sheila, family was both weapon and wound. Yet there she was, at the Thanksgiving table, her smile brittle, her words too measured, as though pretending gratitude could mask the grief clawing at her insides. Deacon watched her, unsure what frightened him more, her composure, or what might come after it shattered. He'd seen that look before, years ago, in the eyes of the woman who had destroyed everything she loved in the name of vengeance. He had hoped she was different now. He had believed, foolishly, that love, his love, could anchor her. But Luna's death had reignited something dangerous in her, and Deacon could feel it. Every toast, every polite laugh, every mention of being thankful sounded like a prelude to chaos. Adding to the tension was the irony that hung between them, Deacon's therapy sessions with Taylor Hayes. What had started as an attempt to sort through his guilt and self-doubt had evolved into something deeper, something he could no longer ignore. Taylor's compassion had drawn him in. Her understanding of his pain had given him what Sheila never could, peace. And peace, in Deacon's world, was the most seductive thing imaginable. But now, sitting across from Sheila, her smile thin, her hand gripping his just a little too tightly, he felt trapped between two women whose names alone could burn his life to ash. Carter Walton, seated beside them, sensed the tension immediately. He had come only out of courtesy, not loyalty. Daphne Rose sat beside him, cheerful but uncomfortable, her wide-eyed politeness contrasting the unease that filled the air. The meal had all the appearance of warmth, golden lights, laughter, wine, but it felt like a stage play where every actor knew the script ended in tragedy. As Sheila raised her glass, toasting to family, to second chances, to those we love and those we've lost, Deacon's hand trembled slightly. Her voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment, the mask slipped. Beneath the controlled smile, grief burned bright, but so did rage. It was the look of a woman who would not rest until someone paid for her pain. Taylor, miles away, didn't yet know that she too was part of that growing storm. Though she sat surrounded by family and warmth, she could not ignore the irony. Ridge was here beside her, not because he had chosen her, but because he had avoided making a choice. Every small gesture, the way he poured her wine, the soft way he called her Doc, again, brought back the years of promises broken and remade. But even as she felt her heart flutter, her therapist's mind whispered caution. Ridge's love, she knew, had always been a pendulum, swinging between passion and guilt, between Brooke and herself. And tonight, as he looked at her with eyes softened by nostalgia, Taylor knew that pendulum was already in motion again. Outside, the sea roared with the sound of inevitability. Ridge raised his glass, offering thanks for family, for peace, for the blessing of being together. Yet in his chest, he felt the tug of guilt, the image of Brooke alone at home, smiling through pain she would never show. He told himself it was fine. Brooke understood. They were strong enough for one night apart. But even as he said it, he knew that wasn't true. Ridge had spent his life walking a tightrope between two women, convincing himself that love could be divided. Tonight, as Taylor's laughter filled the air, he felt that balance slip again. Back in Los Angeles, Brooke stared at her reflection in the window, the glass casting back an image of Grace hiding heartbreak. The clock ticked softly. Outside, fireworks from distant homes lit up the skyline. She thought of Ridge's promise that morning. "I'll just be gone for dinner, Logan. It's important to Steffi. You understand, right?" Brooke had smiled and nodded, but the silence afterward had screamed louder than any argument. Thanksgiving was supposed to be about gratitude. But for Brooke, it had become a reckoning. Gratitude for what? For a husband who always found his way back to the woman before her? For a marriage that seemed destined to repeat the same cycle of longing and betrayal? She poured herself another glass of wine and whispered into the empty room, "Maybe this time, I'm the one who walks away." Meanwhile, Deacon's secret glances toward Taylor in recent weeks had not gone unnoticed. Sheila's instincts, honed by years of survival and manipulation, caught every flicker of guilt in his eyes. By dessert, she was smiling too sweetly, her voice too calm. Daphne excused herself to take a call, and Carter shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the storm forming behind Sheila's eyes. Deacon's phone buzzed once, a simple message from Taylor. "I hope you're doing okay tonight. Be gentle with yourself." He should have deleted it immediately. But he didn't. Sheila saw.
Of course she saw.
And in that moment, the calm shattered. Her eyes went cold, her smile froze, and though she said nothing, Deacon felt the weight of a threat he knew too well. "If I lose you, I will make everyone suffer." The two Thanksgivings, one by the sea, one by candlelight, unfolded in parallel, like twin ticking clocks. Each filled with laughter that masked fear, love that concealed resentment, and silence that promised explosions yet to come. Ridge was playing with fire, and so was Deacon. Taylor was walking a line between compassion and temptation, while Brooke's patience was wearing thin. And Sheila, wounded, grieving, dangerous, was beginning to stir again, her grief crystallizing into something lethal. By the time the night ended, the ocean had gone dark and the candles at Il Giardino had burned low. Ridge kissed Taylor's cheek a moment too long. Deacon drove Sheila home in silence, her fingers tapping against the window, her eyes distant. Brooke sat alone, a single candle flickering before her, whispering to herself that peace is never permanent in the world she lives in. And somewhere in the space between all their hearts, destiny was already at work, setting the stage for the chaos to come. Because in the bold and the beautiful, every act of gratitude carries the shadow of regret, and every holiday that begins in peace always ends in revelation. Ridge and Taylor's dinner had reopened old wounds. Deacon and Sheila's feast had planted the seed of destruction. And Brooke, elegant, heartbroken, unyielding, had begun to imagine a future that didn't include the man who never truly stayed. Thanksgiving had ended. But by Christmas, hearts would be broken, alliances destroyed, and one family's secret would detonate across Los Angeles. For now, they all slept beneath the illusion of calm, unaware that the most dangerous storms begin after the quietest prayers of thanks.